The goofy guy you see in front of you is actually a formidable necromancer who's currently giving the Demon Lord and his massive army a serious run for their money. His name is Han Jihyuk, and the old man beside him is Teros, a summoner who brought Jihyuk here from another world to take on the demon threat. Once Jihyuk defeats the Demon King and his army, he's promised a ticket back to his home planet, Earth. Jihyuk believes he's earned a well-deserved retirement after staying in this world to prepare and fight the Demon King. As a parting gift, he plans to take all that glittering gold and treasure with him so he can live the rest of his life comfortably. Now that the Demon King is defeated, Teros casts the migration spell to send Jihyuk back to where he came from. Finally, Jihyuk opens his eyes back on Earth, and the wish he had been waiting for has finally come true. The first thing Jihyuk wants to do when he gets back is grab some kimchi fried rice and kimchi stew. After that, he's got nothing but time, along with all the treasure he brought with him to spend. So he decides to take his sweet time figuring out how he's going to enjoy his fortune. But when he opens his third-dimensional pocket to check on the treasure, he's hit with a nasty surprise. It's completely empty. All the gold bars, jewelry, and loot he worked his ass off for while fighting demons is gone. He's currently left with nothing but zilch. The stark reality weighs on his mind psychologically. He spent 25 years of pure hell. All the crap he endured, all the blood and sweat he wasted is now for nothing. That bastard Teros had stabbed him in the back. Just as frustration threatens to boil over, something catches his attention. A mana wave. It's shocking because Earth is supposed to be completely devoid of mana. Then, out of nowhere, a crack forms in the sky. The place where this crack appears plunges into chaos as the city descends into panic. While everyone else runs for their lives, Jihyuk does the opposite. He runs toward the anomaly. When he gets there, the scene is nothing short of horrifying. Monsters are pouring out of the portal, swarming the area like a plague. The poor guy has no freaking clue why in the world monsters are suddenly ravaging Earth. The only thought that crosses his mind as he takes in this chaos is that Teros must have sent him to some other planet instead of Earth. This is when he notices a helpless child who trips and falls while running. Right behind the kid, a flying monster is closing in, ready to devour its prey. In that moment, Jihyuk's hand crackles with dark energy as he decides to take these bastards down once and for all. But just as he's about to act, someone else steals the spotlight. A soldier cuts the monster down with just a single slash, saving the child. And it's not just one guy. There's an entire group of soldiers, each wielding different mana-infused weapons, fending off the horde. Slowly but surely, the group takes down every single monster, while Jihyuk can do nothing but stand there, watching in awe. This is the first time he's seen people this powerful on Earth. They're just as strong as the warriors from the Saron continent, where he spent those grueling 25 years. Suddenly, a soldier fires a beam of fire, and it narrowly misses Jihyuk, passing right by his left shoulder, and it hits the monster behind him. The poor guy freezes on the spot, stunned by how close it was. Seeing how completely messed up this world is, there's only one thing on his mind now. He wants to hunt down that old bastard Teros and beat the crap out of him for sending him here. But after a few days of research, Jihyuk finally confirms that this place is, in fact, Earth, the same Earth he once knew. The difference now is the existence of these strange anomalies called gates, the monsters that come from them, and powerful individuals known as awakened. Ever since gates started appearing on Earth, some people began developing unusual abilities. These people call themselves awakened. Now that Jihyuk thinks about it, Teros had rambled something about this anomaly before sending him back. But what really matters right now is that his dreams of a luxurious retirement have gone completely down the drain. At his age, the thought of having to work just to make a living feels like a nightmare. Sure, if he registers as an awakened and starts hunting in the gates, he could make money fast. But the idea of doing that sounds so unappealing that he'd rather die than deal with it. He considers using his magic to summon skeletons and let them do all the work for him. But then another thought hits him, which is how people are going to react to undead creatures wandering around. That might not go over too well. Eventually, Jihyuk decides to suck it up and go take the test to register as an awakened. Surprisingly, when the examiners see his undead creatures, they seem intrigued rather than horrified. While they're curious, they're not completely boggled by it either. The fact that they are not overreacting is because this new Earth has seen some weird stuff already. So, the testing proceeds according to the usual format. First up is the combat power test, and the instructor decides to go up against one of Jihyuk's undead skeletons. But the moment the instructor swings his bat, the skeleton's skull pops right off and rolls across the floor. That poor guy didn't stand a chance. It's painfully obvious how weak these skeletons are. With just that, it seems like the instructors have already made up their minds. They head into a room for a quick discussion, leaving Jihyuk waiting. Well, not exactly waiting. He enhances his hearing to eavesdrop on their conversation. The instructors think he's interesting, sure, but they also agree that his abilities are kinda underwhelming. They note that the skeletons are fragile, their durability is terrible, and their combat performance is nothing to write home about. That said, they can't deny how rare necromancy is. So, after some debate, they decide to classify him as F rank. Finally, Jihyuk gets his license as an awakened, and it's time for him to start making some hard cash. Most necromancers use their mana to inject willpower into undead creatures, which is what makes them move. But here's the catch. Human mental energy and mana have their limits. This restricts the number of summons Jihyuk can maintain at a time, making his job all the more challenging. To solve his summon problem, my guy came up with a new method. Instead of manually controlling each skeleton, he gives them pre-recorded commands based on the situation. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's the most efficient way to use his skeletons. He calls this his macro system. In simple terms, he programs specific algorithms into the undead, allowing them to respond automatically to certain situations and follow his given commands. This way, he doesn't have to manually control them, and he can summon as many as he wants. But here's the catch. It's like programming a computer. At first, there were bugs caused by conflicting commands, so the system wasn't perfect. On the Saran continent, Jihyuk spent many years perfecting his macros. If he had those here, he wouldn't have to deal with this mess. But that bastard Taros didn't just steal his macros. He took all the treasure Jihyuk had worked for. If he still had his retirement funds, he wouldn't be grinding through these hellish dungeons in the first place. Since complaining isn't going to change anything, Jihyuk decides to create a basic computer system to make his life easier later on. He checks his phone and realizes he's been hunting for 4 hours already. It's time to head back. As he walks out of the dungeon with his dead monsters in tow, he immediately catches everyone's attention. The sight of a whole entourage of skeletons following him is hard to miss. The other awakeners start to murmur among themselves that while this guy's got an entourage of boneheads, they're so weak it's no surprise he's stuck at F rank. But those whispers don't faze Jihyuk. He keeps walking his own path, unbothered. Suddenly, a guy with a ponytail steps in front of him. Turns out, he's someone from the guild Jihyuk recently signed with. His job is to inspect the monsters Jihyuk hunted and pay him for the haul. After a quick calculation, the guild rep hands Jihyuk a humble payout, transferring the funds straight to his bank account. While it's enough to get by, Jihyuk can't help but feel frustrated. Living a hand-to-mouth life was never part of his plan. The dream of a comfortable retirement feels like it's slipping further and further away. Still, he finds a silver lining. Being F rank has its perks. He's flying under the radar, avoiding unnecessary attention. He tells himself to survive the early grind, and once he fine-tunes his macros, clearing gates will become a breeze. As Jihyuk heads out, he overhears a group of hunters talking about him. They're jealous, pointing out that with all his skeletons, he doesn't even need to hire a porter. Porters are expensive, charging more than 30,000 won an hour. On top of that, they demand hazard pay, which feels like a ripoff since no one actually dies in low-level gates. One awakened suggests to his friend that they should invite Jihyuk to team up. But the guy with the sword just shrugs it off and starts walking toward the gate. He's convinced Jihyuk won't join them anyway. Summoners usually don't team up because their style doesn't sync well with others. But Jihyuk surprises them. He approaches the two awakened himself and asks if they're looking for a porter. The both guys are caught off guard and hesitantly admit they were just about to hire one. In that case, Jihyuk offers to help out. Since his business is still fresh and new, he promises to provide porter services for free this time. And that's when a genius idea came to life. An idea of renting out his skeletons as porters. Honestly, it's brilliant if you ask me. He creates a specialized skeleton, naming it the Skeleton Porter MK2. This bad boy can carry anything and haul it around like a champ. While MK2 works for now, it still needs a lot of refining. It's still the perfect eco-friendly solution. No fuel, no complaints, no breaks. It just gets the job done. Jihyuk sets the price at 30,000 won per hour. Considering the skeleton is equivalent to 3 human porters in terms of value and productivity, it's a bargain. At a third of the cost of hiring human porters, it's an incredibly lucrative deal. Unsurprisingly, the awakened party is more than happy to use Jihyuk's services. Jihyuk is more than happy to do business, and he asks the awakened duo to spread the word about his skeleton porter services. To sweeten the deal, he promises them a special discount for their help. Before long, his business starts booming. He even hires a personal assistant to handle the paperwork and deal with customers, freeing him up to focus on refining his skeleton macros. The customers are loving it. Everyone who uses the skeleton porters is beyond satisfied. But you're probably wondering how Jihyuk managed to snag such a hot accountant for himself. To get that story, we need to rewind a bit to when he was wandering around the gates. It all started on a day when he was roaming the gate, fine-tuning the macro system for the Skeleton Porter MK3. While doing his thing, he stumbles across someone lying on the ground. Just a single glance is enough to tell him that the person is already dead. Not wanting to invite trouble or disrupt his plans, he decides to walk away. But for some reason he stops. Something compels him to turn back to that dead body. After a moment of hesitation, he decides to use his necromancy powers on her. His plan is to turn her into an undead assistant to manage the stall while he sells his skeleton porter services. Though Ji-hyuk is curious about how this girl ended up in such a sorry state, he decides to take a peek into her mind using his necromancy powers. What he sees only fuels his anger. Turns out, Han Seowa, an F-ranked awakened, was just working part-time in the gates to scrape together a living. But during a dungeon run, her party abandoned her after she got severely injured, leaving her there to die. The thought of Seowa being betrayed by such trash enrages him, but he keeps his cool. And just like that, Ji-hyuk ends up with a zombie assistant, Han Seowa, who now helps run his skeleton porter business. Thanks to her, business is booming. Seowa's efficiency is unmatched, and the money is rolling in like never before. But one issue lingers in Ji-hyuk's mind. How should he deal with the people who betrayed and left her for dead? Ultimately, he decides against taking action. It'd be a massive hassle, and frankly, Ji-hyuk hates unnecessary complications. With that settled, his attention shifts back to his skeletons. The growing demand for his porters has stretched his supply thin. There are barely any skeletons left to rent out. Since this gate is reaching its limit, he contemplates moving his stall to another location. But before making a decision, he takes a short break, deciding to take a dump. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the human porters nearby, who are growing increasingly bitter. Watching their jobs being stolen by tireless and efficient skeletons is a tough pill to swallow. With demand for human porters dwindling, jealousy and resentment are beginning to bubble beneath the surface. The guy with glasses decides to move to another gate, but then the blonde guy, who is known as Chunsu, points out that there are still a few skeleton porters in stock. This means the owner of the business has the option to expand to another gate, where these extra skeleton porters could easily be rented out. To deal with the unemployment issue, they need to figure out what to do about these skeleton porters because they can't afford to keep being pushed around like this. At that moment, two other guys join the scene and agree with Chunsu's assessment. The only way they're going to get any job requests is by dealing with this skeleton porter rental business. But Chunsu reminds this dude, Kim Yonggi, that picking a fight with another awakened isn't a good idea. Well, Kim Yonggi already knows this. He's not stupid enough to start a fight with an awakened, no matter how weak they might seem. However, he's got a solid plan in mind that he believes will work in their favor. He claims to have an awakened friend backing him up, so there's no need to worry. But he does want everyone present to help him out with his plan. The blonde girl volunteers to join Kim Yonggi's plan, but the Chunsu disagrees, especially since there's no guarantee it'll work. In that case, the others just ditch him and walks away. Seeing them all leave with such ill intentions, Chunsu can't help but feel uneasy. He's not sure if what they're doing is even ethically right. Concerned, he decides to send an anonymous warning letter to Ji-hyuk, hoping to protect him from any potential harm. Just as he's contemplating this, Ji-hyuk strolls back after a satisfying dump, confidently reassuring the blonde guy that there's no need for any warning. He's got it all covered. Chunsu's mind is gripped by horror as he wonders if Ji-hyuk somehow overheard everything. Ji-hyuk quickly confirms it. He explains that he hates being trapped or manipulated, so he plans on wrecking anyone who tries to get in his way. But he's actually pretty happy to meet someone like Chunsu. He finds the warning letter method rather adorable. Since Chunsu is actually a good guy at heart, Ji-hyuk offers him a part-time job. Of course, Chunsu is baffled by the sudden offer. Our boy then elaborates that he's been thinking of expanding his business and that he'll pay him generously for his help. He outlines his plan, but unfortunately, we don't get to hear any of the juicy details. But based on Chunsu's bright and happy face, it's clear that whatever Ji-hyuk's plan is, it's something big. Chunsu is certain that if they go ahead with it, all the protesting porters will join them in this business. Ji-hyuk admits he put a lot of thought into the plan, and it's something that will definitely work out, though he makes it clear that he does not want porters like the ones who were plotting against him just a while ago. The poor Chunsu breaks into a cold sweat, trying to reason with Ji-hyuk. He reminds him that the guys they're dealing with haven't been able to catch any gigs, and that's why they're frustrated. That doesn't necessarily mean they're bad people. He hopes Ji-hyuk will understand and be willing to cooperate. But Ji-hyuk, while never one to forgive betrayal, decides to make an exception this time. After all, he knows what it's like to struggle with no money. He decides to give the others one final chance, mainly because Chunsu insisted. But he makes it clear to Chunsu that the terms they discussed must remain a secret. If those guys are willing to come back and trust Ji-hyuk enough to cooperate, then it means they can be trusted and will stay loyal. Chunsu agrees to the terms. Meanwhile, the group of porters led by Kim Yonggi meets up with another faction. This new group is led by Kim Jong-yuk, a low-ranked awakened, who's confident that with his party's help, taking down an F-rank like Ji-hyuk should be an easy task. Also, this bastard looks exactly the same as the one who left Seowa dying in that gate. He admits that he's tried the skeleton porters himself, and while they're incredibly convenient and cheap, it's no surprise that so many people are hiring them. But, he says, the porters in this group have every right to earn a living too. So he lays out today's plan. Jonghyuk proposes that once Jihyuk is heading home at the end of the day, they should follow him, start complaining loudly, and draw attention. Then, when Jihyuk reacts and gets physical, the group will step in to take care of him. This way, they'll make Jihyuk look like the aggressor, and they won't face any problems. The greedy bastard then also makes it clear that he will be charging fee for the help he is providing. He plans to take a tribute fee of 15% to 20% of what the porters earn on each trip into the gates. But Yonggi reminds him that this was never part of the original deal. Jonghyuk asks his friend if he really expects anything to come for free in this world. He's not about to risk a fight with an awakened person without getting something out of it. Then he tries to push Yonggi's buttons, questioning whether he's really going to let Jihyuk steal their job opportunities like this. Jonghyuk believes that having a job and paying a 25% fee is better than having no job at all. With no other options, poor Yonggi reluctantly concedes to the deal and agrees to pay the greedy bastard his 25% tribute fee. The smug asshole pats him on the back in an exaggerated show of appreciation, pleased that he got his way. He then walks off, confident that they will succeed tonight. Yonggi trembles as he walks back to the group, but his friends aren't having it. They're furious at the thought of having to hand over 25% of their earnings to Jonghyuk after paying taxes. They don't know how they'll survive like this. Yonggi snaps at them and blames it all on Jihyuk, saying that if he hadn't come along with his skeleton porters, none of this would have happened. They wouldn't be losing out on work or begging for scraps. He tells his friends they're free to leave if they don't like the deal. This is when Chunsu comes rushing, telling everyone to calm down. He urges them to listen, explaining that what they're doing isn't going to solve anything. Yonggi, however, isn't in the mood to hear it. Annoyed by Chunsu's interference, he asks bluntly why the hell he's even here, wondering if he's trying to pretend to care about the group now. Chunsu, however, doesn't back down. He goes on to explain how he met Jihyuk and assures them that he's not the bad guy they think he is. He even tries to drop a few hints about Jihyuk being a good person. But before he can finish, Yonggi gets even angrier. He accuses Chunsu of being a traitor, but Chunsu tells him to simmer down and takes a deep breath. He reveals that Jihyuk has actually come up with a new plan, a way where everyone can still make a living without the exploitation from Jonghyuk's deal. According to our boy, there has to be a way for everyone to work together. Even with his skeletons, it's too much for him to handle everything on his own. Then, everyone starts demanding a solution, asking how Jihyuk plans to eradicate the unemployment he caused among the porters. Chunsu stays quiet though because he can't say much. He promised Jihyuk that he would convince his friends without sharing any details about the proposition. Meanwhile, Yonggi isn't ready to trust Chunsu or Jihyuk just on a few empty promises. But Chunsu keeps insisting that Jihyuk isn't a bad person. In fact, he's a rational guy who's willing to listen. He tries to convince Yonggi to just trust him, claiming it's in everyone's best interest. One of the girls in the group decides to trust Chunsu, and then another guy follows her, saying that Chunsu is the one who lent him money when he was going through tough times. But Yonggi remains stubborn, making it clear that they have to protect their livelihood themselves. It looks like the blondie girl and the guy with glasses have already made up their minds, and they are ready to believe Chunsu. Yonggi feels utterly annoyed thinking about how they're now backing off from what they said. But he lets one thing slide before they leave. He reminds them that if they can't take Jihyuk out, there won't be any jobs left for them. It's finally nighttime, and Jihyuk is heading back after a long, tiring day. He pulls out his phone to order some jokbal for dinner. But just as he's about to place the order, Yonggi blocks his path. Without wasting a second, he starts grilling Jihyuk about what he exactly told Chunsu and the others. Jihyuk just claims he only offered a part-time job to Chunsu. Nothing more. It was actually Chunsu who came to him for the favor. He assures Yonggi that it has nothing to do with him. The other goons Yonggi brought also appear on the scene. Seeing this, Jihyuk starts to work his charm. He had been planning to just play along and tease them a bit, but since his food is already on the way, he wants to wrap this up quickly so it doesn't get cold. With his single spell, he binds all of these suckers with the chains. Not only that, but there were actually a bunch of idiots hiding, and Jihyuk drags each one of them out using his powers. Then there's that greedy bastard Jonghyuk. Seeing how overwhelmingly powerful Jihyuk is, the bastard starts breaking into a cold sweat. It doesn't take long for Jihyuk to recognize Jonghyuk as the one who killed that poor girl at the gate, the same girl who's now working as a part-timer for him. Jihyuk hadn't planned to let him get away with the sin he committed, but he admits he was too lazy to go find him. Now though, he's glad that he didn't have to. Jonghyuk walked right into his path, saving the trouble of finding him. Jonghyuk is bewildered to see the lady he left to die standing right beside Jihyuk. Meanwhile, Jihyuk is practically buzzing with excitement, looking forward to having some fun. He makes it clear that this is what happens when you harass someone just trying to do their job. Jonghyuk's face glistens with sweat as my guy makes his threat crystal clear. And that's when the punishment begins. Jihyuk throws the bastard hard to the ground. He then proceeds to summon his terrifying undead skeletons to send a clear message to the bastard that meddling in other people's business isn't a good idea. The skeletons latch onto the poor bastard and start strangling him as if they're harassing a woman. Jihyuk is sure that after getting beaten up by dozens of undead, this bastard will get the message. It'll also serve as an example for the other assholes who might have ill intentions toward him. Jihyuk makes sure to give these idiots who tried to harm him a proper scare with his undead, which are enhanced by illusion magic. A while later, Chunsu and his friends return to Jihyuk and pay their full respects for giving them a chance at employment. Jihyuk responds modestly, reminding them that he actually needed more people to work with him, so there's no need to apologize. Chunsu then questions our boy about what exactly did he do to those bastards. Jihyuk claims he just gave them a friendly warning to make sure they don't act like that again. Anyway, he decides it's time to move on to the main topic. He points out that the hourly rate he's offering is slightly lower, around 25,000 won, but assures them that they'll never run out of work again. This is when he showcases his new invention, the state-of-the-art six-legged transport skeleton known as MK4. If they work with this skeleton, they are all set. None of them present have any clue what the hell this thing even is. Later, in the busiest joint of the city, we meet a few veteran awakeners who are about to head out on their next expedition into one of the gates. They're talking about the new buzz surrounding skeleton porters. Since everyone's flocking there because of how convenient they are, these guys are also curious to experience the skeletons themselves. This is when we see the blondie girl sitting in the six-seat skeleton, preaching about her services. She claims that they're here to provide porter services as a team, and this team consists of herself, the team leader, and 2 transport skeletons. The price, however, is 120,000 for each time. Naturally, this insane price tag is off-putting to the adventurers. They've never heard of people being part of the deal. They wonder if they could just hire the skeletons to keep costs down. But the blondie girl sadly clarifies that they only rent out team units. The adventurers start discussing among themselves whether paying extra for a person is a good idea. One of them concludes that it's not that expensive when you consider the package includes 2 skeletons and 1 person. He decides to give it a try, just for the heck of it. With that, they end up hiring her, causing the girl to flash a pleasant smile as she promises to make sure they get their money's worth. As they enter the gate and hunt a few monsters, the blondie girl assures them that they won't have to handle the packing while moving, because she'll make sure to take care of all the packing herself. The adventurers are actually quite awestruck by how much convenience this service is providing. As soon as one of the guys senses the presence of nearby monsters, the blondie girl quickly hides inside the skeleton carriage to keep herself safe before the adventurers start fighting. Once again, the adventurers are happy they don't have to worry about the porter getting injured during the fight, which is just another plus for this service. Once the combat is finished, the skeleton carriage's hood pops open, and the blondie girl jumps right back in to start processing the bodies immediately. The adventurers can't help but take note of how fast and efficient this skeleton transportation service is. They're actually looking forward to hiring her again tomorrow, so one of them asks if they can reserve her team. The girl welcomes them wholeheartedly and promises to provide the best service with the utmost efficiency and cost-effectiveness. And that's how Jihyuk's business began booming. Everything's going great, and the skeletons, once considered weaklings, have turned out to be incredibly convenient. But Jihyuk gets angry when he remembers his time in Saran, where everyone looked down on his skeletons. Anyhow, our boy had been hesitant about increasing the number of porters until now. He'd love to mass-produce these skeletons and rake in the money, but that would inevitably draw a lot of unwanted attention, which sounds like a huge hassle. His dream of a peaceful retirement life would be over if that happened. Typically, summoners can only summon up to 10 summons, but Jihyuk has already exceeded that threshold. If he adds more skeletons to his collection, it will definitely attract some eyeballs. Meanwhile, his assistant is glued to her phone, like every spoiled kid nowadays. Her negligence during the job earns her a bonk over the head. He snatches her phone away and notices that she's watching idol videos, which just pisses him off even more. He's annoyed because, while he's trying to figure out how to make things better, she's watching this nonsense. Curiously, he starts thinking about how these idols make a shitload of money with just one performance. But sadly, fame comes with no privacy and lots of struggles. So he's not sure if he should dip his toes into the showbiz world, especially since all he wants is to quietly earn money and enjoy his retirement. But now that Jihyuk thinks about it, he doesn't necessarily have to be a celebrity to get famous. If you're rich enough, you can make your own fame. If he's going to attract attention, why not go all out? So, he decides to strike while the iron is hot. He dials up Mr. Park, who handles the financial side of things. He tells Park to increase the stock of monster bones he's buying. Park asks him how much he wants it to be increased. Jihyuk quickly checks his current balance and instructs Mr. Park to go with 32 million won worth. From now on, he wants to invest every single profit into buying more bones, so he asks Park to handle it well. Park promises to carry out his duty and makes sure to gather the freshest ones for him. With that, Ji-hyuk ends the call with a smile, confident that Mr. Park won't disappoint him. The next step is expanding his business by establishing a fully recognized company. He plans to rent a decent warehouse, set up a company, and distribute dozens of skeletons daily. The next scene transitions to the Gate Management Bureau, Awakener Registration Office. There, we meet the big cheese of the company, the Registration Office Director. He's asking his assistant if there's anything special to report. The assistant responds that there's nothing particularly noteworthy, but there is some information regarding Ji-hyuk that he wants to convey. According to the latest records, Ji-hyuk created 32 skeletons almost a month ago, and he's apparently established his own company, called Siron, which officially opened today. While the director isn't exactly thrilled by the name of the company, he's glad to see Ji-hyuk rising to the top. He makes a point that it all depends on how an individual chooses to use their abilities. No one would have imagined that Ji-hyuk would make such good use of his goofy, weak skeletons. If he's started a company, that must mean he's made some decent money. The assistant reveals that, based on rough calculations, Ji-hyuk's monthly earnings have probably risen to the billions of won. The assistant is sure he can't expand much further than that, because a person can only summon a limited number of creatures. He's already reached his limit, so the assistant asks if they should stop keeping an eye on him. Suddenly, another assistant comes rushing into the office with some juicy news. But the director explains that he's already heard about Ji-hyuk starting a company. However, the glasses-wearing assistant points out that there's more to it. Apparently, Ji-hyuk has just invited a massive number of porters and is flooding them with skeletons. This news comes as quite a shock to the director because previously, it was reported that Ji-hyuk had hit the limit with 32 summons, and now it seems he's broken his own record. Last month, his record stood at 27, which he broke and set to 32. But it looks like he's broken that record again. But the glasses guy claims that Ji-hyuk has gone way beyond that this time. The director is now very curious and desperate to know how many skeletons Ji-hyuk has summoned to get his assistant so worked up. The glasses-wearing assistant quickly holds up 3 fingers, so the director speculates that maybe Ji-hyuk has added 30 more skeletons, meaning he's now maintaining a total of 62 summons. Well, it looks like the director's speculation is way off the mark, because Ji-hyuk is handling 300 skeletons, and there are rumors that more are about to come. The director wastes no time and quickly heads to where Ji-hyuk is running his operations. And it looks like Ji-hyuk's business is in full swing. The assistant comes back and reports to the director that the number of skeletons has now exceeded 350. The director expresses his desire to meet Ji-hyuk directly. The assistant tells him that Ji-hyuk is in the warehouse. The director walks toward the warehouse and finds himself awestruck when he notices the grandeur of the place. Ji-hyuk is literally working on a whole other scale. Seeing the director standing there, Ji-hyuk decides to take a quick break. After all, it's lunchtime anyway. He then hands over his ATM card to Chunsu and tells him to eat well and buy some delicious food for the other porters too. Turning toward his guests from the management bureau, Ji-hyuk greets them. The director's assistant reminds Ji-hyuk that he's the same person who conducted the initial test with the skeletons when Ji-hyuk first visited to join. Suddenly, the assistant notices this girl beside him and asks about her, to which Ji-hyuk simply claims that she's his cousin and that she's here to help him with the work. The assistant throws another question, wondering if all these summons were produced by Ji-hyuk himself, to which my guy confidently confirms this. The assistant then mentions that he's received a report saying there are already over 350 skeletons working, to which Ji-hyuk affirms once again. The assistant then inquires if Ji-hyuk deceived them during the entry test, to which Ji-hyuk denies having any intention of deceiving anyone. He admits that even he didn't expect to summon this many. The director then turns to Ji-hyuk and tells him that from now on, he wants him to stop summoning. You see, summoning over 100 skeletons is already considered overkill, but we're talking about 350 here, which is far beyond the typical limit for an awakener. To think that an F-rank awakener can summon this many sounds like a miracle. But Ji-hyuk doesn't seem thrilled with the director's suggestion, and he's not sure why he should stop. The director reminds him that summoning this many skeletons is already abnormal. But Ji-hyuk sticks to his guns because he doesn't see anything wrong with it. He reveals that when he founded the company, he had lawyers review all the summoning-related laws, and there are no laws regulating the number of summons. The director claims there are safety concerns, but Ji-hyuk reminds him that these are the same models he used before, and the director didn't find any problems with them initially. So Ji-hyuk isn't sure why this is an issue now. The director then turns to his assistant, keeping his voice low, and asks if there would be any problems with what Ji-hyuk is doing. The assistant responds that, legally, there's nothing wrong with it, because the law didn't account for having this many summons when the rules were created. This is when Ji-hyuk speaks up, clearing up the doubts. He explains that he founded the company under the special law for awakeners, which allows the rental and usage of abilities for profit. The safety of his operations has been proven through consistent use without any issues, so he doesn't see anything else that needs to be addressed. In the end, the registration office staff who witnessed the massive number of summons can't argue against Ji-hyuk's thorough preparations and leave without a word. My guy feels absolutely elated about the feat he's just achieved. As he puts it, sometimes making a big impact all at once is the best strategy. If he had released a few dozen skeletons a day, the department would have found all sorts of excuses to interfere, but this mass production played a significant role. People just freeze when something completely unexpected happens. He then thinks about how far he should go with the production, confident that he can produce more than 300 skeletons a day. If he saves up 2,000 summons and releases them all at once, no one will be able to say a word. With that, he sticks to this plan. 4 days later, we see Ji-hyuk looking exhausted. He's clearly drained, having spent almost 4 days to produce 1,000 transport skeletons. Still, 1,000 skeletons is a huge amount, especially since the media went wild when they heard about an awakener with over 500 summons. But Ji-hyuk isn't worried about the law or the media. What's really bothering him is that he didn't want to work this hard. He's starting to regret his decision to start this business, because making 300 skeletons takes a lot of effort. All he ever wanted was to retire and avoid work, but now he's working hard just to afford a comfortable retirement, which makes absolutely no sense. Just then, Chansu arrives at the office looking a bit panicked and reveals that something big is happening outside. Ji-hyuk sits up in his chair and asks what the issue is. Chansu explains that a large group of protesters from another region has gathered outside. Apparently, they're claiming that transport skeletons are taking over the porter market. Awakeners are now saying that human porters are too expensive and inefficient, which has led to widespread unemployment among porters. And now, everyone's blaming Saran Company for stealing their jobs with cheap summons. The protesters are demanding that the CEO of Saran guarantees the labor rights of human porters. This is then my guy steps outside in order to disperse the angry mob. He invites them for a discussion in order to solve the issue with peace. The personal meeting takes off with the company's CEO addressing the protest concerning the porter market. He wants to hear the opinions of the people before adding his input. Knockoff Ryu from the streets over here argues that the porters are suffering because of the transport skeletons. They're all being pushed off the gates as no one around the area ever even bothers hiring human porters. In the off chance these guys end up land work, it's always considered suboptimal compared to the skeletons. Ji-hyuk wants to think about the situation calmly, understanding how his skeleton model can replace 6 porters at a time. With 250 skeletons currently disrupting the market, that means he's already taken nearly 1,500 jobs from the porters. What's more is that he's got another 1,000 transport skeletons ready to move. If he releases them, the porters are going to suffer a loss of 3,000 jobs. But to reach his personal retirement fund goal, which is our boy's top priority, he's got to make at least 10,000 of these things at least. If that comes to pass, the situation will be even worse. Ji-hyuk accepts responsibility and shockingly declares that he'll stop with the production of the transport skeletons, as his company will eventually threaten the livelihood of the porters. He's also planning to make them pricier than before, so they don't disrupt the market. It's a glowing solution to their problems. Ji-hyuk wants this all formalized with paperwork managed. He requests Chansu to take care of that, who is actually happy that it didn't take much conflict to resolve the situation. From this meeting, he's come to respect Ji-hyuk even more than ever before. After the meeting, the CEO over here has a whole new issue at hand. Now that he can't tamper with the porter market, he's got his own business worries to deal with. He decides to open his draft for a new design, a simple one that isn't engineered for combat. Only this time, he has to maintain the requirement that they don't eventually threaten other jobs. While Chansu is thinking of him as a considerate soul, the reality is, Ji-hyuk foresaw that he was going to get criticism from around the world, something he wanted to avoid. He crosses out a bunch of design ideas before focusing his attention on the pen label. The guy notices how everything here has been manufactured by China. This sparks him with just the right idea. After all, he's got no need to consider the well-being of another country as opposed to his own. So a few days later, at a nearby shoe factory, the factory's owner resigned in defeat. He can't find himself ever being able to compete with China's price points, which are so competitive that it's not even enough to pay the salaries of his company. Deokbae receives a startling visit from his assistant, who mentions the topic of transport skeletons and the company producing them called Saran. Deokbae already knows about the company, expressing his jealousy and his earnest seeing a guy getting an awakening and making a fortune out of it. He regrets being unable to do the same, failing to become awakened. Anyway, his assistant isn't here for that. He's brought along Ji-hyuk and his assistant in person. The CEO exchanges pleasantries and offers his interest in the shoe industry. In fact, he's interested in buying the factory, something that Deokbae was looking for in desperate times. He's all up in the air, happy to give Jihyuk a guide around the place. Deokbae doesn't want to lose this chance. He really wants to get rid of the company for the sake of his workers. Jihyuk and his assistant scout around, while the company's CEO introduces them to the machinery aisle where the components are cut and stitched together. Our protagonist Elon Musk over here calls the machines outdated, which is true enough to make the old man sweat. It's only thanks to his skilled employees that they've been able to bridge the gap between the outdated technology. Jihyuk finds it a reasonable answer and suggests Deokbae to continue. He shows them a bunch of different departments all around, until the presentation comes to a close. Deokbae's done explaining, and from the looks of it, Jihyuk is happy with what he sees. He thinks it's simpler to manage than combat macros that he had to program. Of course, Deokbae doesn't understand a word of what he's talking about. Also, the young businessman is really curious as to why there aren't any automatic machines around. The cutting is done by the machine, but the rest of the procedure requires manual labor. In this case, he's going to have to worry about the workers required to run the full factory at its optimal capacity. Deokbae's got 20 workers at present, but at his peak, they were at 100. This gives Jihyuk an interesting insight, and he wants to know how the sales side of the business works. Deokbae explains that they take orders from customers and actually custom design each shoe. The customers are the ones responsible for additional changes, and they just tamper with the base design. Jihyuk questions why they aren't taking the approach of selling them from a stock. While it's a good approach, Deokbae fears that any unsold product would result in a ton of loss for the company. That's why smaller factories like his own prefer taking orders by demand. Jihyuk is really happy with his honesty while the poor man sulks to mention that it's public information at this point. Damn, his company is really in the gutter. Jihyuk wants to know if a low labor cost model would succeed if they prioritize cheaper shoes. To that, Deokbae answers that it's not a piece of cake as shoes are beyond the realm of automation. It's one key reason that brands don't rely on cheap labor for the production of their products. However, Jihyuk isn't exactly talking about automated machines. He just wants Deokbae to humor the question and answer truthfully. Even Deokbae believes that it will sell well. That's just the kind of confirmation that Jihyuk needed. Having heard what he wanted, he offered to purchase the company right away. The kid gets all the paperwork finished, and the factory is now his to keep. Also, he's so chill that he even lets Deokbae keep his position as a boss and even retain the remaining employees. Excited as ever, the old man promises to do his absolute best to secure orders to repay his kindness. But Jihyuk is okay with what he has. After all, his interest lies in producing massive stock and selling via exports. To showcase an example of his words, he summons a bunch of his skeleton friends who will be joining them as new interns. Jihyuk's hoping for Deokbae to guide them to success. And you guys can just see it on the man's face, on how he's regretting his life decisions already. Boneheads get to work observing the shoe and working around the factory. It's been a long time since the older gentleman has seen this kind of busy work. He now thanks Jihyuk for giving his factory the life it needed. It all evens out since Jihyuk has Deokbae to handle the sales process for him. He talks about his initial surprise. They'd never even imagined the thought of using skeletons for employees. It also made him worried if they were breaking any laws. But Jihyuk expresses that it's not the case at all. He showcases one of the prepared shoes, which is custom-made and even better than what the old man expected. At the same time, it lacks the rich quality of a skilled labor worker. Jihyuk wants a serious and more critical answer from him, so the old man expresses the flawed stitching. Hearing that, our astute protagonist gets to work and fixes the issue. He shows him a new shoe, this time all perfected in its stitching. Jihyuk is happy to hear that, and he's just fine with taking care of each problem one by one. He also understands that his summons don't have any labor costs to worry about, which means he'll be reaping a giant profit off of the business. Deokbae confirms that it solves the main issue of labor in its entirety. Because of this, they can finally compete with the Chinese products and export them too. If they can just build their reputation as a dependable business, they'll even receive brand orders in the future to come. Jihyuk's rather surprised to hear this. He was thinking that the brands preferred operating in their own factories. But as it turns out, a lot of them like to handle the design while the factories take care of the manufacturing process itself. So now, all they have to do is handle the orders from existing factories. It simplifies the procedure as Jihyuk won't have troubles for the design part of the process. But it does worry him to some extent, to rely on something external. Anyway, Seron's shoes shortly entered a period of production. To handle the demand, Jihyuk wanted several factories under his name to scale the business. For the same reason, our boy got busier than he should be. With all the work finished for the day, he calls off the summons and bids farewell to his assistants. The recent work has started to take a toll on him a little. Unfortunately, Deokbae calls the guy, which makes him afraid that even more orders are coming. Jihyuk picks up and learns that it's exactly his worst nightmare. More orders. This dude is the definition of suffering from success. His night was ruined, and that became the main problem as it went on. Deokbae always felt bad about additional adjustments from him, but both Jihyuk and his assistant were at their limits by now. He took notice of his apprentice who struggled more than usual. It was a good time for him to consider apprentice training. Still, the procedure would take a bunch of time and effort and exhaust him. Jihyuk's going to have issues with more assistants too, because he can't really hide the bodies of the people he resurrects. In the off chance that someone discovers he's using literal corpses for his company's staff, his reputation will go down the gutter. That's why it's crucial for him to handle the fundamentals on his own. The rest is going to rely on his macros and their adjustment. Speaking of macros, they're the perfect answer to his painstaking situation. Jihyuk realizes that it's just a matter of programming. So in the next few days, he got himself busy and called forth Baek Sangho, a newly hired recruit. This guy's a nervous wreck who doesn't really have much experience on his resume. Jihyuk is hoping for him to possess some sort of special skill that could help them out. Sangho is losing his mind under the pressure of the interview and wonders if he should mention something related to the job. His boss is okay if he doesn't have an answer, but Sangho jumps up and reveals that he's impressive at gaming. For the unemployed squad watching this video, this kind of answer is something that will super maximum plus ultra 100% secure you the job. I guarantee it. Jihyuk learns that Sangho's pretty good at basically every genre, which means he's a degenerate high-ranking player on most games he touches. For some reason, this dude keeps talking about his gaming experience. Jihyuk asks if he's skilled with strategy games. Conveniently, that turns out to be this sweaty gamer's specialty. To demonstrate his skills, he's got a video to show his boss. The game was originally about assembling parts to make golems, but using those building blocks, Sangho impressively made an aircraft. He designed the physics engine and it's working inside the game. A lot of it is the nerd stuff, the right kind of nerd stuff that was seriously hard to pull off. Sangho's adept explanation for a game makes him wonder if he's about to get kicked out of the office. But to his surprise, his boss shockingly gives him the green signal and hires him on the spot. While Sangho was supremely excited at the prospect of starting work, on his very first day, he was faced with a damn skeletal controller resembling an Xbox D-pad. Honestly, who else thinks this would make for a cool fucking skin? Because I'd buy it. Jihyuk explains that it's supposed to be a computer for operational purposes. But in no way does this creepy thing look like a computer. He clarifies that it's more of a control console to maneuver the skeletons. Each limb can be controlled, and Sangho's initial task is to simply master the movements down and replicate a gymnastics routine. For this, he's provided an easy deadline of a week. The neat thing about this console is that it's actually a mage skeleton in the shape of a controller. Unlike typical boneheads, these mages got powers of magic. All Jihyuk had to do in this case was use creativity and add buttons and levers for handling control. It's hard to operate as a prototype, but Sangho actually managed to replicate the routine 2 days before a deadline, impressing his boss. Next, Jihyuk requests a review from the gamer on the console and if there's any nitpicks to add. He gives a whole list of issues and workarounds for our boy to refine. Jihyuk plans to tweak the console later and so far is satisfied with his new recruit's performance in the team. After all, he's also the company's first programmer. In the future, Sangho will be the lead programmer of their company, so Jihyuk wants him to prepare himself for training others. That's how he'll eventually get promoted and earn the big bucks, earning them mutual benefits. Hearing that, Sangho becomes loyal to his boss and hopes to exceed expectations for him. Jihyuk receives a call and learns that there aren't any issues. He's really annoyed at his office director calling for no reason as of late. As for Sangho, the kid is doing well. He struggled at first, but now he's getting the hang of things with the shoes. It's great so far, and eventually calls for a second programmer to come. Also, their production is stagnating according to Jihyuk, when in reality, it only feels that way because their factories are expanding immensely. Rumors of their growth are spreading around. Also, his assistant just made the first Barbie-looking bonehead. How neat. Anyway, Jihyuk is getting impatient to hear from any important brands, but it turns out that less than a month passed since his purchase of the first factory. The old owner wants to send a proposal, but he wants Jihyuk to be prepared to get rejected in case something happens. It's not because of the fact that they're producing cheaply, but rather a matter of trust. They don't have that kind of trust acquired so far. Jihyuk wonders why their production quality is subpar compared to the major brands. But that's not the issue either. They've gotten to the level where their accuracy now matches a human's precision. This is good news because all they need now is to improve the reliability aspect of the work. Jihyuk intends to craft and launch a proper ad campaign. They highlight the shoes that are made by skeletons, enough to generate mass attention. But before getting to that, his attention suddenly turns towards the punk Barbie-looking rockstar skeleton. Jihyuk's just bursting with fury when he sees it and wants his assistant to fix the thing immediately. Then he realizes something and tells her to keep it as it is. It might comfort the people coming here. All he asks is for her to remove the pink. Anyway, The first outside visitors come around, shocked to hear the truth behind the rumors of the skeleton workers. They're all dressed up nice and clean. They even see a vendor that offers them a handmade article as a souvenir for free. They are priced extremely generously and retain premium quality. The design is the only aspect that seems lackluster, but it can be adjusted on demand. Hearing that, the customer is stoked to purchase 4. But since they're limited for now, they only go 2 sales per person. Over time, it generated quite the hype on video platforms and even the news. Deokbae reported a work order from Roku, a popular sports brand that ranks one of the highest in the US. It's just the thing his company needed to get started on sample production. After the sampling is finished, he greets the businessmen in person and earns their praise. It's good enough to be shown to upper management. Jihyuk curiously asks if they've got a good shot of securing a deal. At this stage, it's uncertain because of one reason. The production cost is a good thing, but the skeleton aspect of it has yet to see proper probability. It's a weird issue on his front, but Jihyuk skips ahead to lay out contract terms. The representative of the brand explains that the terms aren't exactly in their favor either. This makes Jihyuk disappointed because he's assuming they'll even have to lower the price. But it's not really that. Rather, the contract duration and volume of stock won't be large. The reason for that is that the big brands prefer long-term contracts only due to scale. If a minimum number of orders are promised every month, it helps them get consistent sales. Effectively, in short, sweet terms, it means guaranteeing a minimum revenue for a stable supply. Deokbae also warns the kid that brands prefer using the guaranteed volume party trick to lower prices in negotiation, but it won't be the case here. The representative of the brand confirms their thoughts and explains that their company is looking for a temporary replacement for now. That's why the contract duration is short and won't guarantee a large volume. If their factory works out fine, then it will only become a burden on their company later. Jihyuk curiously asks about their promised volume and learns that the Roku company can offer a volume of 40,000 units. For clarity, Deokbae explains that it's clearly not enough to catch the attention of the manufacturers. This puts Jihyuk into thought, as he wonders if a business like their own can thrive by accepting smaller contracts and expecting more in the future. Also, the Roku company's headquarters have been sending proposals all around, but there hasn't been a finalized contract so far. Hearing that, Jihyuk is up for the deal and counters that they won't be needing a 3-month contract either. He's fine with a 1-month contract with future extensions if the business works out. At the same time, he's not good with promised volumes or anything, so their prices won't change by even a bit. Finally, in the case of quality issues or faults, they're ready to double the production cost as a penalty. Now that's an offer hard to reject. With the terms cleared, Jihyuk is fine with it and secures himself a deal. But from what entailed, Deokbae is in shambles. He can't believe that the kid made the terms even worse than they already are. But that's exactly his point. It's what Jihyuk is aiming for. He calls in question the free samples that are always tried and tested without any pressure. No one will be able to manage their prices so they can pump out the best quality. And no other company can hope to match their level of flexibility either. So for now, his stunt is to bend a knee and gain validation from the brand. After experiencing the reward they can bring, Jihyuk knows that the same brand will be begging them to make more by the end of the contract. And he's all the more thrilled to showcase the full potential of his boneheads. At the Roku headquarters, the company's CEO learns that they're operating at max capacity, and any further production increase would hinder the labor aspect. To meet the 300,000 shoe demand, they're going to need a new factory to work with. So the CEO asks about the deal that came out of the factory in China. Turns out that those guys are asking for a 6-month contract with 200,000 guaranteed each month. They also discussed a different factory which had its own issues. The thing is, they're in urgent need of producing 70,000 pairs by the end of week. The assistant inquires if his boss has seen the video of the summoner producing shoes based on his summons. It's something that the CEO knew nothing about, so he's given a video for demonstration. Immediately, the guy is stunned to see a skeleton working the part of labor. Turns out they've also got their contract, the ideal 1-month deal with extensions upon further agreement. They're even guaranteeing compensation for faults. There's also no labor cost involved, which is just huge for these guys all around. The quality of the product is also satisfactory, and the assistant believes it would be worthwhile to give it a shot. There's no risk involved even if the company messes up because of what they promised. So they decided to place a smaller order of 10,000 pairs to see if the company is up to mark. The same day, Deokbae is happy to announce the order from the famous brand. Finally, they've gotten the attention they needed. Now they just need materials to start production immediately. Jihyuk doesn't even want the current production line to stop as he's got plenty of summons to work with. However, shaping the components will require multiple machines, and those things are at a limit. Jihyuk realizes that it's another issue he's got to fix, so now he's ready to create a machine of his own. The old fart is just continually stumped by this kid's talent. They'll need space additionally to manage things. so Ji-hyuk recommends them to use the Saran company's warehouse for the job. It seems illegal to work at an unregistered warehouse, but our boy has gotten that covered a long time ago. Their problems are all finished in one go, so Ji-hyuk wants to go full speed with the operation. The following day, the Roko company holds an executive meeting until their assistant receives a message. He's shocked to deliver the news of the skeleton company's results. These guys have already completed the order and not even a single day has passed. The email confirms they have delivered all 10,000 pairs, and the inspection showcased no faults either. Everything seems perfect, an opportunity that the big brand doesn't hope to turn down or let go of. They're expecting the manufacturing company to handle a bulk of orders monthly at this pace. Even if they don't guarantee the volume, the contract is just monthly, so they'll face no trouble. It's a good deal, and the CEO gives them the signal to get the stock ordered for the full week. This time, he needs to test them with numerous models to see if they can handle the load. The news gets to Ji-hyuk, who learns that they've been tasked to deliver 60,000 pairs across 7 models. It really seems like they're testing how far they can go. They're also curious about the max production capacity, just the thing that our aspiring CEO is looking for. He phones Park and tells him that they'll need even more boneheads to work with. This will be the real challenge of their production limits. Now, right after placing the order, the Roko company was completely bamboozled to discover that it only took 2 days to get the order wrapped up. After that, things proceeded smoothly. Additional orders came and they completed that in 2 days too. Then a follow-up order of nearly 150,000 pairs came, and they delivered it in 4 days. It was mind-blowing how the Saran company was using 10 days to produce a month of the brand's stock. With that, both companies officially shook hands and secured the deal. The suspended factory was also brought back, but by this point, they've enjoyed the benefits of the Saran production. Then there's their unmatched consistency and quality. The power of skeletons is astounding to these businessmen. The assistant expresses how they've always experienced losses from testing out unreliable factories, but merely working with Saran flipped those losses all over. It helps them cope with the inventory loss, a perfect outcome for the company's CEO. So then, they decided to officially get a formal contract going with the manufacturer. The representative came bringing the contract. Ji-hyuk's efforts bore fruit and things went down exactly as he said. Stated in the contract, there's a yearly agreement of guaranteed volume of 150,000 pairs. It's a golden deal, until our boy reads something unpleasant and confirms with his Daokbai if these terms are right. The terms are sitting in front of him, but Ji-hyuk's not very impressed. He hands the board to Daokbai for a look, who reads it only to become surprised to point out that there aren't any issues. The models are missing, but it's not really their problem so long as it aligns with their policies. But Ji-hyuk's annoyed at exactly that part, and grabs the papers before highlighting the clause of the penalty regarding production delays and issues. Both of these things require compensation from their party. The representative explains that the contract by nature requires compensation, but the headquarters did their best in leniency. But this kind of leniency is unheard of and only gets on our boy's nerves. He can't fathom that this is the standard industry practice to ensure a smooth run. While it's hesitant of them to sign the contract, the representative explains that this sort of thing is normalized in the industry. It would essentially mean he would never secure any deal with a major brand. He wants Ji-hyuk to understand that these are just clauses kept for safety purposes and nothing more. Ji-hyuk goes on a rant of his own, stating how he went on a business trip once. He learned how he was told to worry about one thing only and forget the rest. But right as he got to his job, things weren't as they seemed. The one simple thing they mentioned was more complicated than ever. In one of the companies, he ended up crossing the line with an executive and they took the blame on him, despite him being the reason for the company's success. It was during that moment he realized something critical in his life. If he does as other people demand of him, he'll become a pushover. So that's why Ji-hyuk isn't a fan of standard practices and likes to handle things his way. He argues that their results have proven everything that should be asked of them, and that's enough from Ji-hyuk's side, so he comes to a decision. He doesn't want either of those clauses to be included in the agreement, and if both are good, then he'll sign the contract. Receiving this paper, the representative strongly argues that it won't pass the company's headquarters. But Ji-hyuk's okay with that, and wants to remind their dear brand that he can always flock to other brands to work around a contract. He finds clauses like these annoying to begin with. He wants to deliver on his terms if they're ready. The rest is up to their company. Receiving that paper in his hand, the company's CEO fumes with anger. His agents believe this is just a mockery at the highest level. Some of them speak against Saran, while others highlight the benefits of working with the manufacturers. At the same time, the board is concerned that they'll be setting a problematic precedent for themselves in the future. The CEO has a headache and decides to lay low and observe the situation for a while, but that only took a matter of time too. It was only until the factory received additional requests to increase production. The CEO was having troubles with other factories and inevitably sought the need to get Saran back on the table. He understands that the company operates unusually from the rest of the industry, but their consistency of production is unparalleled. The assistant tells his boss about the defects that are springing from the new factories they've been testing, causing even further delays and defects. Once again, it gives more reason and highlights the Saron company's track record. The CEO asks about the manufacturer's status. Turns out that they've been sending proposals to other brands in the meantime, who've already shown interest with samples. It's only natural considering the company's track record. The CEO reaches an enlightenment and immediately signals his agent to proceed with Saron's contract. He wants it wrapped immediately, because if the other brands get the jump on them first, they'll lose their trust forever. In the end, it was a total success for Ji-hyuk's company. The negotiations wrapped on his terms, and even other brands began to join in on the fun. Just their monthly orders alone now exceeded the production request of 1 million pairs. Ji-hyuk was chilling by this point. He was securing contracting on an amazing trajectory. A perfect success of his business. Interestingly, some brands are interested in offering them the production of clothes too. Ji-hyuk has a rough idea of how to work around that. It's the same cheap labor logic like it was for shoes. So our boy sets his next target, a clothing factory in sight to get the business rolling. He wonders if it would be an amazing idea to start a full-scale manufacturing company that prepares anything on orders. Deokbae loves the idea and thinks their wonderful leader will lead them to success with that too. And now, our beloved retired necromancer decides to set an ambitious goal of solidifying his very name with the manufacturing business globally. 6 months flew by. Clothes and accessories of all kinds were being made. The company expanded into further industries and labeled itself as a manufacturing company. Still, one problem surfaced. The shoe factories were working fine, but the rest of the factories were having idle skeletons. Deokbae recommended that they make a hybrid factory model for the maximum benefit in labor. They could always use the skeletons to work on other tasks whenever they finished with one. The only lacking aspect is space, since the factories they have are small in comparison. Machinery is large and requires room to set up. This problem puts our boy in trouble because he's got one issue layered on top of another. It's the fact that Ji-hyuk has personally lost all motivation. His initial goal of crafting the world's largest factory is now being hindered with the completion of his monetary goal. He doesn't feel the need to keep going. Deokbae recommends the kid to go home, which makes him excited for a second, until the cruel old man steals his excitement by shoving him with a mountain of documents to sign. Even the old owner is bullying him now. Anyway, the reports aren't urgent, so it gives our boy just enough time to chill for one day. Ji-hyuk is happy until he gets notified of an emergency unstable gate nearby. His first priority is to guarantee the safety of his staff. He comes outside and learns that the threat is actually skeletons, which, as you can assume, is an issue for Ji-hyuk. The emergency response team is already battling with skeleton monsters. Turns out that these bastards are tough to beat, so the team is barely holding on. Arriving to situation, Ji-hyuk's feeling nervous going on. After all, those skeletons are his own. He's able to decipher their exact type and model. It's good that these guys didn't cause much damage, but he needs to retrieve them quickly before they do. Shockingly, Ji-hyuk's retrieval spell doesn't work, causing the bastards to switch to combat mode immediately to target him. The emergency team is exhausting itself fighting even more powerful versions of the skeletons from earlier. Their behavior alone is strange, to the point Ji-hyuk can't manipulate them at all. He tries another approach on the main boss, but that fails too. The boss swoops in to slash one of the team members, injuring his chest. Ji-hyuk realizes that he's got no choice but to intervene now. The team leader is injured, and they can barely fend off these guys in time. They wonder if this is the end of the road for them. That's until Ji-hyuk steps in to save their lives. Up in the air, they see a high-ranking awakener doing his best to save them. They call him for help, but that's really why he's here in the first place. Ji-hyuk is getting sick and tired of these boneheads fucking up his precious reputation. From afar, the guy realizes that it's actually Han Ji-hyuk himself, the CEO of Saron Company, who has come to the battlefield to save them. Ji-hyuk's attack wipes the monsters clean, astonishing the emergency team members with his abilities. They're not so shocked anymore to see his capabilities in action. The very reason he never made any combat skeletons is because this dude doesn't even require them to get the job done. He's just that guy. The gates finally close, so our boy turns around and confirms if everyone's okay. The Awakeners show their gratitude since they would have definitely died without him. Ji-hyuk tries to be humble and brushes it off as nothing. Inside his head, our boy wonders what's happening with his skeletons. The other Awakener acknowledges our protagonist and bows down to show he's thankful. They both express how shocked they were to see the monsters coordinating with each other, since monsters usually have no intelligence. One of them asks what Ji-hyuk thinks about it. Our boy anxiously diverts their focus to the injured, as they need proper treatment first. The Awakeners show their gratitude once again and go back to deal with the aftermath. Ji-hyuk looks at them with stunned eyes and wonders why the Awakeners of this world are so weak. He decides to forget about it and hopes he can gain something from whatever happened. He takes the skeleton pieces back with him. At the apartment, our boy takes a closer look and finds out it doesn't have his mana. He finally understands why his subspace stops working every time. It's only accessible when objects are fused with his own mana. Ji-hyuk loses patience and furiously orders Seo-ah to chill out and stop being so loud. She quickly stops messing with the monster core. Our boy checks them out, knowing they're very expensive. The core he's holding suddenly reminds him of something. He notices it's very pure and untamed. Ji-hyuk guesses the skeletons were probably being controlled by the gate's mana, which means he was able to easily get back to Earth. But when his skeletons tried the same, they got absorbed into the gate instead. Bro starts crying in frustration, since his mana got replaced with the gates. That's the reason the skeletons followed their macros and ignored him. He takes a step back as he realizes other things might come out as well. If a Death Knight appears, Ji-hyuk knows he'll be cooked, even though he's the one who created them. He decides to create an undead army of his own to fight off the catastrophes. The biggest thing he needs to deal with is magic stones. He tries using the core for it and thinks about gathering corpses as well. He needs gold and metal for the high-grade undead, which means he has to make a lot of money. Whatever he's earning from his business isn't enough at all. Our boy sits down in frustration, realizing he might never retire. He decides to increase his production so the business generates more income. But he calls it a stupid method since he needs a huge factory and to implement a hybrid structure to make this possible. But buying a factory itself requires a huge amount of money, so it all just comes back to money again. He guesses hunting is possible as well, but after years of grinding so hard, our boy becomes frustrated to see he's having to do it again. There aren't many choices for him to pick from either. He gets a call at such a bad time, so bro tries to just ignore it, but Park Woo-jin speaks up and asks if Ji-hyuk still remembers him. Our boy responds anxiously and asks if he's doing okay. Park shares he left the hospital finally and was hoping he could express his gratitude properly. Ji-hyuk sends him his location and waits for him to come. Ji-hyuk gets annoyed hearing all the noises coming. Park pulls up in a sports car and instantly starts thanking the protagonist while hoping he's not being a disturbance. Ji-hyuk notices his expensive car and calls it impressive. Park laughs it off like it's nothing and says he bought it since he's an awakener. The protagonist is surprised, but Park shares that awakeners usually buy a cool car as soon as they start earning money. Ji-hyuk asks for a favor and reveals he has an amazing business idea, so he's hoping Park will hear about it and share his opinion. The guy agrees to it without hesitation. Park gets dragged to a dungeon byproduct market. He wonders why they are here, so our boy orders him to just wait and see. Ji-hyuk finds a shop and asks the owner to show a high-grade monster, at least comparable to a horse. The guy pulls out a Demora for our boy. Park explains it's a B rank, so it is definitely durable. Ji-hyuk agrees and asks for more. The seller shows a few horse-sized monster remains as well. Ji-hyuk takes them and surprises Park by storing them in his subspace. Park asks about it, so our boy anxiously comes up with a stupid story to deal with it. Park remembers he did the same thing last time as well. He finds it suspicious but decides to forget it. They go back and Ji-hyuk assigns an important role to Park. He orders the guy to tame his monster first and pulls the Demora out of his subspace. Park gets ready to do his best but hopes Ji-hyuk goes easy on him. Our boy smiles wickedly and starts the match. He surprises Park by asking him to ride it instead. Park thought he was about to fight the thing. Our boy puts a saddle on it and orders Park to get on since he agreed to help. The ride's extremely terrible for him. Park instantly comes down and pukes his guts out after a few seconds. Ji-hyuk asks him to try once more. Park feels comfortable in this one, so he runs it around. After a while, Park calls it amazing and asks if he's hoping on making combat easy with this. Ji-hyuk says his only goal is to help people move around on it, and he's planning on selling the thing as a mount later. Park's confused, but our boy continues with customization and turns it into a cool animal, leaving Seo-ah amazed. While she plays with it, Ji-hyuk admits it's nothing special but very useful if people want to ride inside the gates. Park agrees and goes crazy over it. He's ready to buy one right now but wants to go with a different color. Ji-hyuk listens to his amazing customization ideas while Seo-ah takes a selfie with the ride. Park borrows it for a while and drives it through the city, which helps the product instantly get recognition. Park calls it a success since his mounts are great attention grabbers. Ji-hyuk asks him to use his vacation days if he wants a discount. Park instantly agrees, so the protagonist thinks about producing more custom options. Bike barges in but gets shocked seeing the undead mount in real life. The protagonist happily invites him to help them make custom options for it. Bike takes the opportunity and gives a few suggestions. He comes up with a design that impresses Ji-hyuk, but Park believes it should look strong since it's a mount. Bake argues that its cute look carries a special aura of power that's not something a typical beginner will understand. Park doesn't take the disrespect while our boy just happily observes and calls it healthy competition. He stops the fight and orders them to come up with designs. Whichever gets the most votes will be rewarded with bonuses and a discount. Both of them agree. Things go as Ji-hyuk expected. He smiles, imagining all the money he's about to make from this. Ji-hyuk holds a giveaway event for its marketing. He gets on stage and talks about the skeleton commander mount. Our boy reveals the base look, which disappoints the crowd, but Ji-hyuk already expected this, so he pulls out the design they've been seeing online, instantly changing their behavior. They go crazy over it. He adds that they can even customize it to their liking once they buy a mount. The product isn't just for looks and everyday use, but they can even take it inside the gates. It even has a built-in monster evasion function, so the mount comes right back to its owner when called. People are impressed to hear its features. Ji-hyuk ends the boring speech and decides to choose the lucky winner who can experience it for himself. He announces the base costs 150 million and chooses number 37 as the lucky winner. Ji-hyuk lets the guy choose any design for himself, but the blondie goes with whatever's listed and finds a good one. Our boy mentions installment plans, but the guy shocks him and calls the price spare cash. The crowd recognizes the blondie as Seo Hanyeok, team leader of a unit at the Hanul Guild. Ji-hyuk is impressed to find this out. Seo orders him to show how it looks once equipped, but our boy doesn't allow it, as it'll make the mount second-hand. He decides to show the parts instead. Beck congratulates his victory, while Park cries seeing the customer going with Beck's choice. Seo asks for some glowing initials on both sides. His total becomes 700 million with everything. The price scares the guy, so he decides to add it later. For now, he just asks Ji-hyuk to put S on both sides. His total, with base included, becomes 700 million. Our boy asks him to move his hand forward and become its owner. Seo does what he says, and the mount becomes his. For the final step, Ji-hyuk asks the guy to come up with a name. Seo goes with Yundori, but his crappy name choice disappoints the protagonist. He announces everything on stage and decides to choose another winner. Before, there were only 2 ways for average people to see monsters. Either on media or dead remains at the market. Sometimes monsters would jump out of the unstable gates as well, but now there's another way. A random woman notices the monster running around, but her friend points at the rider and calms her down. He calls it a commander mount and is amazed by how cool it is. The guy notices Seo's the one riding it. Seo orders Yundori and instantly leaves. Others watching him hope to buy it as well. Seo's unit members notice him. They've faced Demoras before, but the mount gives a completely different feeling. They take permission to pet it, but he stops them since it only acts cute around its owner. The guildmaster Kim Hanyul appears and notices the armor on its body. Seo orders his pet to sit somewhere and chill. Kim wishes to take a closer look, but Seo's a bit hesitant. He lets the guy see, so Kim examines the thing and finds out it's sturdy. He recalls seeing it's even customizable in a video. Kim decides to remove its armor, but Seo tries stopping him since it's not removable. Kim doesn't listen and ends up breaking the armor. Seo's spirit breaks instantly. He falls down on his knees and frustratingly makes it clear for Kim again. Kim tries avoiding the blame and agrees on buying a new one, but it makes Seo even more furious since a new one won't be his precious Yundori. Seo orders him to get it repaired right this instant. Kim apologizes and takes full blame. He agrees on getting it fixed. Seo frustratingly orders him to show his gratitude since he's letting it slide this time. The mounts ended up helping our boy make millions of profit per unit, so he had nothing to worry about anymore, until he saw the first ever mount in a pathetic condition. Kim anxiously asks if there's a way to repair it. Ji-hyuk says it's possible, but reminds him that the damaged bones will need to be replaced with matching ones. It's going to be an expensive task. Kim loses his head over it but reassures himself, accepting that bones are just bones in the end. He gets terrified thinking about his team leader, but our boy gives another suggestion. Gluing everything back sounds doable as well, but it's eventually going to break again. Kim sees no other choice, so he contacts Seo, who orders him to restore it to normal. Kim listens and explains that Seo got really attached, so the protagonist charges him 50 million for it. Kim's fine with the price as long as it gets fixed. Ji-hyuk's curious about how it ended up like this. Kim is too embarrassed to tell but ends up revealing he tore it apart, which shocks our boy. Kim continues on to justify his actions and blames it on a video. He was hoping it could automatically reattach itself, so he tried this out before buying one for himself. But then this happened. Kim asks if it's possible to build the same armor for humans. Ji-hyuk gets confused, but the man clarifies he'd love armor like that. Since his real powers allow him to turn into a giant, no equipment ever satisfied his needs. Ji-hyuk suggests using a stretchable material, but seeing Kim's confused expression, he asks the guy to show the issue instead of explaining. Otherwise, building special armor for him isn't possible. They all head outside. Kim gets prepared and transforms into a giant, but our boy becomes speechless, seeing his stretched clothes exposing his Excalibur. He orders the man to go back to normal. Ji-hyuk now understands he doesn't even need armor. The guy is just looking for something that hides his little embarrassment. Kim calls him correct, as he doesn't want to expose himself publicly every time he transforms. Kim whines about his problems, but Ji-hyuk understands the poor guy's pain. Kim's powers truly are special, so he ends up standing out a lot. But Bro's too embarrassed to see his pictures all over the news. He's even hesitant to face his daughter now, and that's why he puts his trust in Ji-hyuk and hopes he gets some proper clothes for once. He doesn't really care about armor, but the guy is willing to pay whatever price just to get his body properly covered. Ji-hyuk thinks about the nice opportunity and decides to start by building a rapport with an S-rank awakener. Our boy suddenly remembers he attached skeletons to martial artists to track their movements back when he was still in Saran. Turns out Kim also uses martial arts, so the puzzles align perfectly. Our greedy protagonist takes the opportunity instantly and agrees on making something satisfying. Since he's willing to work on it, Ji-hyuk wants to focus on functionality as well, so he asks Kim to bring whatever high-quality material he can manage. He's sure it'll be expensive, but Kim happily agrees without hesitation. 5 days later, Seo loses his patience seeing Kim anxiously walking around all over the place. Kim finds it hard to stop since he's eager for his armor. He wonders how long he needs to wait. Seo shares they'll be done in a few days, but the impatient man continues to irritate the unit leader. Kim is scared the outfit might get rushed and turn into a disappointment, but Seo assures him not to think about it since his yundori turned out amazing. Seo advises the guy to build his relationship with our boy since no one besides him is capable of making such clothes. Kim wonders if it's alright to just invite Ji-hyuk to the guild, but Seo doubts a rich guy like him would ever join since he never even gets close to the gates. Kim remembers the unstable gate incident, but Seo thinks of a few excuses as to why Ji-hyuk got involved. They call our boy a suspicious person since he tried his best to keep his abilities hidden, and even now, he's showing no interest in the gates. Most awakeners chase experience inside the gate, but he's different. Seo guesses there's a reason behind it, but it's still confusing for him. Kim assumes the guy might be traumatized. He suddenly gets the news that his suit is done, which instantly lights his mood. The guy heads out, leaving everything to Seo. Ji-hyuk's surprised he already got here. Kim eagerly asks about it, so our boy shows the suit and lets him unveil it himself. Kim gets to it and instantly smiles once he sees his armor. Kim looks at his new armor in excitement. He asks Han if he can wear it when he is gigantic. Han assures him, he also tells him it is in casual mode and helps him try it on. After changing, he wonders if he should change transform. Han tells him to wait as the bones on the suit will also be a part of it when he transforms and tells him to go to Unit 1. He tells him to spread his legs and arms wide. When the red light blinks, he can transform. As Kim grows into a giant, his suit does not rip. He is happy and claims he can finally be someone his daughter is not embarrassed by. He thinks the armor is perfect. He asks Han how to turn back. Han tells him to repeat the same action, and when the light turns blue, he can transform back to normal. After transforming back, Kim notices he does not need to change into new clothes. He thanks Han and asks him how much he owes him. Han tells him he owes 3 billion KRW because the materials needed to build the armor were expensive. Han then asks him to invest into Saran. He intends to pay the money back as soon as possible, and he also promises him free A1S upgrades for life. Kim is tempted by the offer and tells Han he will lend him 20 billion KRW, which shocks Han as it is a very big amount. Kim is sure about this as he will get free upgrades for life and the shake hands on it. Kim tells him he will transfer him the money as soon as he gets back. Yundor OS on to greet his dog as Kim tells him all about his new suit. While discussing this, they hear a sound and conclude that an unstable gate has been opened and it is D-rank threat. Kim figures this will bother the citizens and runs over to take care of the threat. Yundor is asking him why he is running over as he usually avoids this level of threats. Kim taking care of threat in his new bone-covered suit is on the news. The news thinks this suit is the work of CEO Han, who is watching the suit thinking this happened fast. He does not care as long as both parties are happy. He is making money and getting combat data. A few fights will help him get enough data to apply to the undead army. Yundor is thinking limited guaranteed orders are frustrating. He thinks about Saran being at maximum capacity and being able to take new orders. As he is thinking this, he finds out Saran is opening a new factory and they are open to new contracts. He is shocked and orders to push as much of their inventory as they can to this factory before it maxes out. Han is told that Rocco has an ordered 700,000 new units. Han is happy at this rate they will be producing most of Rocco's units. He approves all new contracts but questions why they are only getting mid-tier contracts. He is informed it is because mid-tier contractors focus on design and high-tier contractors focus on technology. He is told that this problem will fix itself as no partnership lasts forever. As Saran grows, people will come to them first and orders tech transfers. They will form partnerships with Saran. This is how Korea's shoe industry fell apart. Han thinks improving technology will not hurt and they will open a research lab. He discussed what the Korean Footwear Association is. He is told it was an association built when the Korean Footwear Association was thriving. It is debunked now but still remains the largest association in Korea with 300 factories. The factories associated with the association are elite survivors as they withstood China's low-cost alternatives. He is told if they formed a partnership with Saran, they can make up for their lack of technology. Kim is already a member, and Han asks him if he can join as well. He is ready to visit and give this a shot. Kim and CEO Han visit the Korean Shoe Association where it seems to be a bog welcome party being held. Han is confused on how extravagant it is. He meets the president of the association and thinks something is off about him. As the president takes the stage, he talks about how the Chinese have taken over the shoe export industry with low-cost labor. He tells everyone that only 300 Korean factories are left, and none of them have more than 500 workers, as the industry is on its decline. He claims things will change as Han will introduce his skeleton technology to them, and he was the one they needed. This makes the CEO cautious of his surroundings. Kim objects to this as they did not discuss this. He tells him that this is not only his asset but his unique ability, and this would not be different from asking an awakener for his abilities. If they want his skeleton ability, they should make a formal request and not discuss this in public. Kim that they are only thinking about the possibilities. Han thinks someone is pulling the strings from the back and tells the president that there has been some sort of miscommunication. They should end the meeting and decides their roles. He thinks they should get on their knees and beg for skeleton technology. He will make the president pay as he tries to play games with him as he walks off. Kim apologizes to Han, who assures him he did not have a hand in this. He tells Han he does not need the Shoes Association. Having their technology would be nice but not important. Kim talked around and found out that the president has been pushing the skeleton agenda for a long time. However, he believes that the president is not the one with power. Only 3 companies that are a part of the association hold that sort of power: MK Mankyung Trading, Tal International, and Taihung Industries, who moved into Southeast Asia and China, but they pay their dues to the Korean Footwear Association to still seem like Korean companies. They discuss whether they have any other potential enemies, and conclude small companies cannot compete with them. They genuinely want skeletons. Han tells Kim that why he stopped transporting skeletons is because there is no point if he cannot make everyone his ally. However, if he supplies his skeletons to the smaller companies, he can get them on his side and remove the threat of the 3 big companies. Han thinks creating an impression he will lend out his skeletons will help him and the factory members to keep their jobs. He goes over the bylaws, and later at the meeting, their people are cheering the president for convincing Han to lend skeletons. The president goes over to meet the CEO. He ignores him and goes on stage to address the crowd. He tells them he will lend them the skeletons only if they impeach the president, as he does not work with people he does not like. According to the bylaws, the president can be impeached if 2/3 of the majority agree. The president tells him he cannot do that as he is not a member. Someone quickly raises a motion to impeach the president and voting begins. The voting to impeach the president begins, and 170 out of 330 members have agreed. Han tells them that if they get 220 votes, he will join the association, otherwise he will walk out of the door he came from. He gets 220 votes, and the president has been impeached. President looks at his phone, causing Han to think he is getting orders from somewhere. CEO tells everyone he cannot lend everyone skeletons, as he will have to adjust skeletons according to 300 companies. He will rather take their orders, and he will make them a unit for 1,500 won, and they can sell for however much they want. He does not care. He is asked what is the difference between this and the ordering directly from his factory. CEO tells them they can sell domestically as he does not want to enter the domestic market. He also tells them as he cannot handle such big orders at once, they will have to keep their factories running and borrow his skeletons on a 3-to-1 ratio. After he reminds everyone of their hard work, he tells them it's time to take back the market from China. He is asked what about exports, and there are foreign established companies whose headquarters are in Korea. Han tells him he cannot please everyone and will not supply his skeletons to them. He asks if everyone is satisfied, and they all cheer on. After that, Han concludes the meeting after asking if the president has any hidden agendas. The president looks on in embarrassment. Siran's orders have skyrocketed because of this. Later in a meeting, the president was officially impeached, and Mr. Kim announced that companies with factories overseas will not be entertained by the association. People are discussing if it's the tree companies abroad, and they get quite a few of their supply from them. Han tells everyone that they are not kids, and passes a motion to remove them from the association. After the motion is passed, he passes one last motion to make Mr. Kim the president of the association, and everyone enthusiastically agrees. Back at the office, Mr. Kim tells Han he could have warned him about this, and asks how he's supposed to handle so much work with the office and now the association. Han tells him he's the only one he trusts, and he could hire a vice president and dump all the work on him. Kim suggests to publicize what they have recently done and send a message through the media. Han is impressed with the idea and tells him to go ahead with it. Business has been going well for Saran. 5,000 skeletons are working his factories, and across all businesses they are making 20 billion won monthly. Han thinks this is still not enough for his undead army. He looks at his phone and thinks Korea were once a heavyweight in electronics as well. Han thinks despite Korea having high-end brands and partnerships, Korea's tech industry is still considered sunset. He wonders why that is so with Seo and concludes that it is because of small things like bulbs. He thinks people prefer cost-effectiveness over quality when it comes to things like these. Han is thinking for an idea to take over this industry. He cannot take over a company as all tech factories are closed, and he is frustrated by this. He thinks on how China took over and remembers except for cheap materials, they copy items. Obviously, he cannot make complete copies. But if he can make some changes to the copies, he might be able to sell. He goes over to talk to Chairman Kim, who tells him to not to call him that. He asks him to join him in his office as he has a plan for a business venture. Seonghun An, manager of Senior Electronics, a new startup by Seron, is in China discussing with a member from a headset production company. He discusses with him about how Seron would like to purchase their designs and licenses, including old ones, and offer up to $1 million for them. The man is shocked on how they will keep products low cost in Korea, but thinks $1 million is low as they exported $2 million worth of product themselves. As Mr. An gets up to leave, saying there is no deal. He is stopped by the man. He thinks they cannot compete with him, signs a deal with him. He asks them where they outsource any production. He is told they outsource speakers to a nearby factory. This way Senior Electronics got many licenses. Han is told Chinese technicians are coming over to perform operations. He tells Baek to observe them and see how the Chinese machines work. He will replicate them with skeletons. Baek assures him and tell it to leave it to him. Later in a meeting with Daiso 1000, Han is met by huge praise for his work with skeletons. He is asked what he wants to sell them, from stuffed toys to clothes. Han tells them it's neither and shows them the electronics he wants to sell. He shows him a speaker which sells for 25,000 won, the factory price is 10,000 won, and tells him he can give it for even cheaper. When Han tells him he can sell for 7,000 won, he is surprised and the man thinks maybe it is the quality. Han assures him he only sells legit products and he can leave the products with him to inspect. The man tells Han there is no need and they need to sign the contract. He asks Han if he can sell them some items for less than 100 yen, as he is in partnerships with 100 yen store in China. Han agrees and they proceed to sign the contract.